Hello, everyone.
Hello!
How are you all out there in the interwebs?
Hope you all are doing well.
It's almost like we just did this yesterday, but
Right?
but at the same time, it's like we haven't done this all month long.
What a joke. What a joke.
I do try my best, um, but we are here today to continue our own personal journey to the Rise of Skywalker, as we
Yes.
are watching a Star Wars film week.
hmm
And I can't
This
help but notice that you're dressed appropriately for our discussion of Solo.
solo Star Wars story. I love this movie
I do
so
too.
much.
Like I think I forget how much I love Solo until I watch Solo, and I'm like, oh
Right.
no, this is good.
Yeah.
like like in my head, I know it's good, and I don't like buy into the like all the detraction that exists online about Solo. But then I
hmm
watch it, I'm like, oh no, this is really good. Like this is not just that's a fun movie to watch, but like no, this is good.
Right. Hello, Dom. Welcome. Thank you for dropping by for some amount of time at least. But
Yeah.
yeah, I remember seeing it in theaters and I was a little bit worried because worried's not the right word. But I wasn't sure how I was going to do with it. Like I knew the trailers made it look fun, but Han was never the character that spoke to me.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, we're going to see how a Han Solo movie goes. Is you know how I feel about spaceships. So I was like, okay, we're going to see how this goes. And then I smiled. I smiled for the entire movie when I was just in theaters. I was just like, this is really fun. Uh, and it just I think it was the movie we also kind of needed after The Last Jedi,
Yeah.
which no one will really remember as we go forward in time and everyone watches these on Disney Plus anyway. But coming off of, regardless of whether or not you loved Last Jedi or didn't, or if you were somewhere in the middle, Last Jedi is a heavy movie with heavy themes and a
Right.
lot of things going on in it and a lot of things to think about. And it was a movie that was made to have that reaction. It was, in my opinion, it was a movie that was made to make you feel strongly about it, regardless of if it was a positive or negative thing. This was meant to just be fun.
Right.
This is everything a Jedi doesn't crave. It's all adventure and excitement. And I don't know. I was really into it.
Well, and I think too, um, if you look at this, and we'll talk about Rogue One next week. It's next on our list. But
Yeah.
if you look at the two, spin-off movies that we've gotten so far, like this is so different than Rogue One even as well. Um, and like I know some of the like technical filmmaking problems you have with Rogue One.
Right.
Like Solo specifically avoids those things.
Right.
Like we don't have the what is it? I always forget that word. The text. The
The crawl, the
well, no,
scroll.
the scroll, but like
Oh,
the
the
yeah.
location thing doesn't have those,
I
thankfully.
know there's a fancy word for that. We'll talk about it next week. Um, but um, but I just think Solo feels so much like Star Wars,
hmm
and to not be a film that has anything to do with the Force or the Jedi at all. I
hmm
mean, apart from like Maul showing up and there being a Sith hologram in the background, like, um, it just feels like quintessentially Star Wars to me.
Right.
And Han Solo is never a character that I've been like super duper like personally connected to. Like I like Han Solo, and I always thought Han was cool, but like I've never connected with Han on like an emotional level before.
Right.
But like this film is so compelling, and the characters are so good, and the casting is so good, and
Perfect.
it draws you in so quickly too. Like there's no downtime. Like you are immediately like just won over by how charming Han Solo is as a character, and it
hmm
just goes through the whole film, and from start to finish. I just every time I watch this, I'm just struck by how much fun it is to watch.
And I'm a big fan of them casting Alden Ehrenreich. I had seen him in Hail Caesar, and I don't know why, because the character in Hail Caesar is nothing like Han. But when he showed up on the short list to play him, I was like, oh, they should do, like, he's perfect. And then he got cast, and I was so excited, especially because it wasn't that guy from the Kingsman movies. That was really my main thing, was don't be the guy
Oh
from the
yeah.
Kingsman. No shade on him, he's just not Han Solo to me. And he was perfect. And then I like, Donald Glover isn't even fair. Like, it's not even fair that Donald Glover exists. He's too good.
Yeah, I was watching that today, and I was thinking, oh, this Simba's in this.
Yeah.
um, but yeah,
Miles' uncle.
like Dom says though too, like even the music for this, like I know this is not a
Yeah.
John Williams score this week, but like I mean I know like they use the Imperial March and they use like the main theme, but like even the parts of it that aren't like variations on music we already know, like it just feels so much a piece of Star Wars that you just
Right.
and I don't know if it's the nostalgia for the Falcon or the nostalgia for Han and Lando and Chewie, but like just from start to finish, it feels like a Star Wars movie, and I just can't help but think, you know, I don't necessarily want us to dwell on this unless you want to, but like people always said, like from the beginning, I don't know why we need this film, as if you ever
Right.
need, you know, any um
Right.
like a film is not a thing that you need, but
Right.
it's just like I can't imagine it not having existed now, and I
Right.
think that says something about the level to which I appreciate this film. Um,
Right. Well, and I mean, we both said that Han was not necessarily the character to, but at the same time, if you're thinking like a short list of characters that could carry their own standalone movie, like, Han makes sense
right,
as that character. Welcome, Sarge, and welcome, Stuart. Um, he just has the type of life where he has interesting adventures. Where Luke has been on a moisture farm. Leia would probably have some interesting stories to tell, sure, but I don't know. It just he's the one where it seemed like he had this big backstory, and if you're going to do this, it makes sense to make his movie.
right,
And for me, it's just like, to go from thinking we were never going to have Star Wars movies again to knowing we were getting a new trilogy to now we have, or at the time we were having all these anthology films come out. And it's like, okay, who cares if we need a Han Solo movie or not? Like, why don't you want one? It's just so strange, that argument. But no, and it's an interesting film to look at in this context, because we're watching chronologically, and so to follow up Revenge of the Sith, which is so force heavy,
right,
so theme heavy, and like sad, uh, and then to have this movie, or if you're going in release order, which I think makes less sense now with the Disney era, but whatever. You'd watch The Last Jedi, and then you would go to this movie. And again, you have the same thing of this dark, heavy movie to this. It's interesting, but it's also fun to look at in terms of theme, knowing it was developed when the sequel trilogy was developed. Because
right,
you have the dice, you can see Han's journey, think about how that would impact his interactions with Ben. Personally, I see a lot of parallels between him and Rey, and I think that's part of why, when he found this random girl that he has no relation with, on his, why he would care is because he sees somebody of a similar background.
right.
Why does he trust Finn after learning who Finn was? Well, it's because he used to be in the Empire. So I don't know. I think I just said a lot of different things, I know, but there's a lot of ways in which this film is very.
Well, and I feel like it tells us so much that like is, if not necessarily important, like whatever important means to you, like it
Mm-hmm.
informs so much about like the characters we know from the original trilogy, because like we see how Han gets the Falcon. We see how like the Falcon becomes the fastest ship in the galaxy. We see how Han
Yep.
meets Chewie. We see how Han meets Lando. Like we see where Han learns not to trust anybody and where
Yep.
Han learns to shoot first. Like so much
Yes.
of what we know about Han and Chewie and Lando and the Falcon from the original trilogy, like even though this comes afterwards, like this is the source of all that. And
Hmm.
I just think too, I think you tweeted this earlier while you were watching it, that you know there's so much Legends material that gave us those details piecemeal,
Yes.
that this feels like, even though it's not a direct incorporation of those stories from Legends, that it
Hmm.
feels like there is a Legends connection. Like this feels like a Legends movie. Like this feels like a
Yeah.
movie that was made with Legends in mind,
Yes.
and I really appreciate that from the standpoint of a fan, especially a Legends fan, and I
Yeah.
feel like as much as people complained about the Disney buyout or complained about the sequel trilogy not paying a whole lot of attention to Legends, like this film is exactly that.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just little details from Han being in the academy, Han finding and saving Chewie, and um, the even Lando's his diary. He talks about Shrew, which is one of
Right.
the Legends books. Just on, and you can not know anything about it. I personally think Solo you could watch as your first Star Wars movie.
Well, I think so too.
I don't know that it's necessarily the best one to start with, but I think it's a valid place to start, especially if you want to start watching it and you really like Woody Harrelson or something, and so you want to start here. Like it's a viable entry point into Star Wars. But then to have all of this really deep lore, I mean, just the stuff in Dryden's office, um, a lot of that's even Indiana Jones stuff. So
Right.
it does a really good job of having those kind of fan servicey moments that don't feel like they're there just for the sake of fan service, but rather
Right.
to incorporate stuff. And I really value that as well.
Yeah, I think so too. I really appreciate, um, again, just the lengths to which I feel like Ron Howard was honestly the perfect person to do this. Um, like I
Mm-hmm.
feel um, like I don't know how big of a Legends fan he was, but like I just feel like he is the director that understands. I don't want to say fan service, because like I feel like when people talk about this or other films fan service, like they use that as like a bad thing. Like, oh,
Right.
all we did was give people something they would enjoy. Like how terrible
Right.
of us. But I feel like this film like gives us enough of that. Like it pulls
Mm-hmm.
on our nostalgia strings without being like overly sappy about it.
Right.
And it gives us something new without completely ignoring what we were nostalgic for.
Right.
Like this film could have been a completely different type of thing. Like we could
Mm-hmm.
have had a Han Solo that is unrecognizable to the Han Solo that we knew. We could have had a story that dramatically retells how Han and Chewie meet, or how Han gets the Falcon, and all of these things in a way that was so distant from what we had in Legends canon that no one would ever connect with it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just not those things. And I think the fact that it was able to walk that line and have a really fun movie in doing so, like speaks to me about how much skill goes into making a film like this, you know. And I feel like
Oh
that's
yeah.
something that we don't think about or talk about in those terms as much.
Well, and I think it really, I completely agree, and I think part of what's so fun about it is how they do Han's personality. I had a coworker who the first time he saw Solo didn't really like it because he felt like Han was not Han Solo. And I explained that this was the movie about how Han became the Han Solo that we see in A New Hope.
Right.
That it wasn't supposed to be about him being that smuggler guy. It was supposed to be about how he became that. And he actually then, when he saw the movie again, said, I watched the movie with that frame of reference, and I liked it a lot more. And so I think, like with many things, it's kind of what you take into the film is what you end up getting out of it. But I really like Kira's line where they're on sardines, the place that refines the coaxium.
That's 70.
And yeah, and yeah, Han and Kira are talking, and it's just like, people, you're the good guy. And Han's like, no, I'm not. I'm not the good guy, he says, like with his roguish grin. And I really like this idea that that is who Han Solo is. That the rough and tumbling smuggler is the persona he adopted over time, especially because he was betrayed by Beckett, by Kira, by any number of people.
Right.
But at the end of the day, in his heart of hearts, he is a hero. He is the hero.
Right.
He might not be the Jedi hero, but he is somebody that you want to look up to, and he is Severine. Thank you. Yeah. And I don't know. I like that. I also like that scene too because it feels like that scene is the scene that Han is thinking about in Force Awakens when he tells Finn that women always find out the truth.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is, but that's immediately what I thought of. Is like they always find out the truth. They know. But yeah.
As you were talking, I was thinking I really want a Han Solo Jedi Warrior shirt now too.
Yeah, I go with the Poe one.
Yeah, but I think you're right. But I think that this film establishes that part of this is Han learning to be the Han we know, but that part of the Han that we know is intrinsic to who he is as a person. Like,
yes.
He doesn't learn to be charming, and he doesn't learn to have a sense of compassion. Like, it's there. Like, what he learns is the scoundrel part. Like, what he learns is like how not to trust some people and how to be skeptical. Like that, and those are key things to who he is. And I think that defines him even after the sequel, or even after the original trilogy. Like, as we get into sequel trilogy era stuff, like if you read like Last Shot or you see Han in the Aftermath books, like I feel like the Han that even the older Han that we get is informed by the lessons that he learns in this film. But I think it not only do we see him become that Han, it shows us that he is the good guy. Like, and that's something, honestly, I mean, and maybe this is because by the time I first got into Star Wars, I kind of had a cultural understanding of who Han Solo was. But, like, I never saw Han as making a complete 180 over the course of A New Hope. Like, I always read A New Hope Han as learning to be, like, allowing himself to be the person that he was.
Yeah.
And I feel like this film shows us that same thing.
Well, and I think Han doesn't get enough credit for the type of kind of mentor character he is. I think it was Obes Canobes on Twitter. He was doing a nice thread about how he kind of mentors like everybody. I don't know if it was. I think it was him though, because he's a big Han Solo guy beyond just having a name like Obi-Wan. But he takes care of Luke. He takes care of Leia. He has this bond with Chewie. He has this way of kind of ending up watching out for other characters. And even the line in Solo, like, it's so easy to think he's the roguish guy who doesn't care about anybody. But when he's in the Imperial Army, his Imperial leader is saying, like, we're supposed to take out the hostiles. And we're like, it's their planet. We're the hostiles.
Right.
And that is not an Imperial way of thinking, nor is it a scoundrel's way of thinking.
Right.
That is 100% a guy with a good heart who is just thinking about the big picture. And it's something that I don't think he really gets. I think it was, when I was watching it today, there's the part where right after the train heist goes wrong, and Beckett's mad at him, and he's like, Beckett's like, I'm gonna go to Dryden. I'm gonna try to figure this out. You should go. They don't know your face. They don't know you were involved. You and Chewie should just get out. And Han doesn't want to do it because he still wants the credits to get the ship, to get to Kira. And Han's like, no, it's worth the risk. I'll go with you. And Beckett's like, well, once you go, you're in this game forever. And there's a certain bravery where Han still agrees to go, that he's willing to make this risk so he can get the credit, so he can get a ship, so he can get his girl.
Right.
But I think is also a bit of naivety where he doesn't know what he's saying. He like, to me, he doesn't get, even though he was, a scum rat living in whatever kind of place Lady Proxima has. Even though he's been through all of this, he still doesn't really get how nasty the galaxy can be, where Kira understands it completely.
Right.
And that was kind of how they always played off of each other. And so I just like this idea that he is making these big heroic things, but he also really doesn't have the experience to understand what he's saying.
Right.
And this movie is him figuring out, oh, these personal betrayals and these dangerous situations and these killer gangsters and what all of this really means.
Right. I mean, but I think too you can see how desperately like he wants like companionship makes it sound weird, I think, but like he wants a friend, like he wants somebody he can rely on because that's Kira, and then Kira's taken away, and then he so quickly latches on to Beckett, and then immediately latches on to Chewie, and like
even Lando to an extent.
Yeah, I mean, and even like Rio, like when you look at how Han is affected when Rio dies, like these are people he's known like zero time, like this is like he barely knows these people, but he so desperately wants like as I mean, I'll say as cheesy as it is, I really love the Imperial officer giving him the name Hunt. Like I really do. Like I just like that. Like it's I've always liked that moment, and I know people don't, but like he wants the people, like he wants to have some kind of connection to somebody, and he talks about how he never was close to his dad, even though he ends up owning the ship that his dad might have built. Like there's so much there about how much he wants a connection, and like when you read, when you think about that, you think about A New Hope through the lens of that. You think about Empire Strikes Back through the lens of that. You think about The Force Awakens through the lens of that. Like and it like this film like captures Han Solo in such a quintessential way.
And even then, the tragedy of losing his son, such as he has. And that, in a way, you could argue that Kylo Ben really wants a connection as well, though he's gone to a different extreme over that. But it's kind of the irony that his biggest need has become his son's biggest need because he didn't know how to fulfill it in someone else.
Right. I mean, or even I thought this mostly because you tweeted it, but like even how willing he is to accept Finn at face value. Like the fact that he was an Imperial himself. Like this, I just feel like this film tells us so much about Han as a character, and I feel like we take it for granted because all of us think we had a handle on who Han was as a character, and this doesn't necessarily disavow us of any of that. But it really speaks to who Han is on such a deep level that I just can't overstate how much I think this is Han Solo. Like it's right there in the name of the film. Like this is the Han Solo film.
And I talking about Rio and how he's affected too, I think part of what Beckett's crew is supposed to represent is what Han wants out of life. Because you have Beckett, and Beckett is who Han wants to be. And Han wants Kira by his side, which is who Val is. And now, Han has found Chewbacca to be like his best friend, and that's who Rio is. And in that moment, at that like campfire right before they go to the train heist, like Han is looking at this crew and seeing everything he wants.
Right.
And then Beckett loses Val and loses Rio, which people have very good reason for being upset about besides just story, and I understand that, nor would I want to detract from that. But I think some of the logic behind it is also to send Beckett down this bad road versus where Han is eventually going to end up.
Right.
This idea that Beckett isn't even who Beckett is in Han's eyes. That Beckett loses everything. He can't handle it. He's lost the only people he trusted, claims he never trusted anyone. And he's going down that rabbit hole to the point where he eventually betrays Han, which is crazy because the part I was talking about earlier, after the train heist and after Han has dropped the cargo and made completely worthless Val and Rio sacrifice, Beckett is still like, you can get out of this, you can go.
Right.
And to go from that to, as Beckett kind of continues to spiral, I'm going to betray you to Dryden, is that journey. Versus Han, who doesn't really take that kind of journey in the film until way, way, way towards the end. Ultimately, they betray Beckett only because he knows Beckett is going to betray him first.
Right.
And you have the Han shot first moment, but again, only because Beckett is going to betray him first. But even then, he holds Beckett as Beckett dies. And I don't think Han is really crushed until Kira leaves him. And that's the point where he goes, oh, maybe I'm a little too soft in all of this.
Right. Well, and especially because, like, she and Dryden and Beckett all tried to tell Han that she wasn't going to be able to get out. Like,
right.
And I think that it's betrayal, but it's not dishonest betrayal, Like,
right.
she saves his life by not telling Maul about him. And so, like, it's betrayal, but it's betrayal that's in his best interest,
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like he has to know that on some level. Like, he has to know
Mm-hmm.
that it's not betrayal for betrayal's sake, if for no other reason than that she told him. Like,
yeah.
like in the make out in the cape room scene, like, she told him, like, you don't understand who I am in all of this
right.
now. And it's not like that she is evil or that she has become this terrible person, but she is embedded in it in a way that is not going to allow her to get out, at least not that we know of yet. And
right. Well, and then to have that spelled out, because all we have is Kira saying she's done things and we don't know what they are. But then Enfys Nest is talking about a village and how it stood up to the Crimson Dawn and they had their tongues cut out. And there's just a lot of shots pointing at Kira to make it sound like if Kira wasn't involved in that specific point that was being talked about, she was involved in things like that. Right. To me, is the implication.
I think so too.
And Han has to kind of understand that, but Han, I think, is the type of guy to not care if you're doing the right, like, as long as you're doing the right thing now, he's not as worried about it, or at least, especially in this stage of his self, I guess, of his character. Welcome, Sin. More capes all the time. I really want a Lando Krennic cape off.
Yeah. that would be awesome. And Kylo's getting like a little side cape deal.
Yep. He can do all the style.
It's one of the design things that I'm most excited about for the Rise of Skywalker is Kylo's little Supreme Leader side shoulder cape thing.
Yeah. As much as I like to pick on Darth Malak because he's a terrible Sith Lord, I always liked his cape that was just down the one side and he could, like, flip it around.
I'll do my Malak impression really quickly. This is... Here's Darth Malak. But so, like, while we're talking about this, why don't we, like, talk about some of these side characters more specifically?
Yeah.
Because and I don't know how to say this in ways that don't just gush about Most Wanted. But, like, Kira is such an amazing character.
About Most Wanted.
I mean, Ray Carson's writing the novelization for Rise of Skywalker, so like there's something here. But like It is such a good book, and I feel like it's one of those books that a lot of people overlook because they're like, oh, I don't read young adult novels. Like, I just want the big people stuff. But man, is it good.
It's so good.
And like if you liked Kira in Solo at all, you have no idea how much you will like Kira and understand her as a character from reading Most Wanted. It's so good.
It's so good.
But like what to toss it really simply, like, what do you think about Kira though as a character? Like, what is it about Kira that you like?
She is so smart, I guess, is what I really like. She's so smart. She's so savvy. Even when she's younger, at the beginning of the movie, and she hasn't been out in the galaxy yet, like, she knows exactly what's going on. I think that when Dryden says you're going to go with them to Kessel, I think that's when she knows she's in trouble. I think she knows she either has to, like, betray Han, which she doesn't want to do, or Dryden's going to come after her. And she is already thinking of how is she going to shift this. I'm not sure that she I think it's some level she wants to be in charge of things, but at some level, it's also she needs to get out from under Dryden. I think,
Right.
ironically, I think there's a lot of connections between her and Kylo.
Yeah.
I don't know that Kylo necessarily had aspirations to be supreme leader of the galaxy, but he definitely didn't want to have anyone telling him what to do anymore. And being
Right.
supreme leader is a great way to not have anyone give you orders. And so I think her reaching a point where she's answering only to Maul helps her with that.
Yeah.
In her mind, that's as free as she can be. But what I like about all of that is to go into Most Wanted, which might be unfair if you guys haven't read it, but one of my favorite things in Most Wanted is there's a part where she's put on really fancy dress clothes for the first time because she's trying to sneak into this place, and the clothes get dirty, and she talks about how it's such a shame. And she's not somebody who likes nice fancy clothes because she's vain, and she's
Right.
not somebody who likes nice fancy clothes because she likes nice fancy clothes. You know, she's not a girly girl, but she respects beautiful clothes because she hasn't had them her whole life.
Right.
So there's so much about her character that has this kind of vulnerable aspect, has this very feminine aspect, but not from a stereotypical aspect.
Right.
Like, she is very much her own character. And we see that a lot in Most Wanted, but we still see that a lot in Solo, that she can wear these really nice clothes. She's very comfortable in them, but she's also very practical at any other point in time
Right.
in the movie. And that's just something I really appreciate.
Well, and I feel like she sees like all the pieces on, like, to use the metaphor of the Dejarik board, like she sees 3 moves ahead. Just like Beckett is telling Chewie, like, you have to be able to see, what your opponent's going to do moving forward. Like, that becomes such a metaphor because she sees it better than anyone. She sees it better than Han. She sees it better than Beckett. She sees it better than Dryden. And like I was, I finished watching it right before we got started today. And she tells Han when they're going up the elevator to meet with Dryden at the end, she's like, "This is not a game you win."
Right.
But that doesn't mean that it's not a game that she doesn't understand better than anyone else. Like when they show up on Kessel, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm the viceroy for the senior grand admiral to the the adjutant to to whatever." Like she knows exactly what to say in a way that's gonna get her. Yeah, but like that's so smart, and like but it's more than just smarts too, because as soon as she gets that guy in the room, like 2 seconds later, he's out.
There's Cassie.
And like there's like she's just such a great character, and it's almost a tragedy, and I feel like we don't understand the extent to which it's tragic because we don't know how she ended up with Crimson Dawn yet.
Like
And we don't know how she gets off of Corellia yet. I'm assuming that at some point, like, they have to give us that story. That's why I'm saying yet, because like that has to be a thing we learn eventually.
They have to.
But so it's a tragedy that we don't know the extent of yet. I mean, I guess it's possible too. We could see, some of the conclusion with, Maul and Crimson Dawn and the Siege of Mandalore stuff. That's a possibility, I guess, too. But she is like smarter than anybody else in the room, and she knows she's smarter than anybody else in the room, but like she doesn't like hold it over you. Like it's a different type of I'm the smartest person in the room confidence than what Leia has, even though Leia is also the smartest, most capable person in every room that she's in. Which says something about Han's type in women. But
he's not wrong.
But it's a subtle I'm the smartest person in the room, where not that she's arrogant about it, but everyone knows that Leia is the smartest person in the room. Like that's just obvious from the way she carries herself, and Kira's just different. And it's not that it's muted or that it's humble, but it's I don't know. There's just a maybe gentle is the right word. Like I really don't know how to put it into words, but there's just something about
for her
Kira.
it's vulnerable. Like her smartest person in the room is survival.
Yeah.
She wants to be the smartest person in the room because she's felt like she's been on the edge of death her whole life. Where Leia's smartest person in the room is more duty and defense of others. So like Leia has no problem putting you in your place or commanding you, but it's not because she needs to feel good or validated. It's because she knows she's standing between innocent people and death. So like
Right.
that's where Leia's command presence comes from.
Right.
Kira is trying to stand between herself and death,
Yeah.
and I think that's what makes it different.
Right. I mean, and like I could spend a whole hour talking about how much I love Kira.
She's so
Um,
good.
and I feel like Amelia Clark was the perfect casting for that too. As much as they got the exact right casting for Han and Lando.
Mm-hmm.
Even though Kira was not a character we knew, I feel like I can't imagine it being anyone else. Um, she's just such a fully formed character from the moment we meet her,
Yeah,
on the same level as Han and Lando,
yeah.
despite the fact that we don't have the history with her that we do with Han and Lando. And I think that's a credit to the filmmakers.
Well, and what I appreciate about her is what I was one of the things that I was kind of actively worried about going into Solo is I love Han and Leia. I love
Mm-hmm.
Han and Leia together. They're a great couple. I wasn't sure how I was going to react to Kira with her being what seemed like she was going to be a love interest just from the trailers. And I really liked their relationship. I think it helped that they were already kind of together at the beginning of the movie. There's no they fall in and out of love in the movie. It's that they're already together, and this is how they end up having distance.
Right.
Um, but I also like that they weren't necessarily a mistake in each other's life. Like
Mm-hmm.
I like that it's not that Han had a girlfriend before Leia and she was trash, and so this is the story of Han and his trash girlfriend. But like in a different universe, under different circumstances where they weren't separated, I think Han and Kira could have worked.
Right.
I really do. I don't think Han and Kira, as of the main plot in Solo, could. I think once she had been in the Crimson Dawn, she was going down a very specific path that wasn't including Han. And that doesn't mean that I don't think she can't ever find a way to escape, but I think at that point, their paths had uncrossed enough.
Right.
But I like that they really did work, and it adds to this tragedy that it didn't get to work out because of circumstance, not because there was a wrongness about one or the other, that they were incompatible.
Right. I mean, and I think, like I was saying earlier too, like this film could have given us a much different Han Solo, like a Han
Yeah,
that would have been wrong for Kira too.
yeah.
And I think it's lucky for us as fans that's not what we got. Um,
No, that they really understood that.
but speaking of other side characters, I think we would be amiss too if we didn't talk about Chewie in this film. Um,
True.
Chewie. Uh, Chewie is the through line for like so much of Star Wars for me
Yep.
in ways that I take for granted, because like you don't notice until Chewie's not there. Like you
Mm-hmm.
like Chewie like Chewie is for Star Wars exactly what he is in the moment where Kira comes in and sits down in that co-pilot chair and he's like,
Yep.
"All right, I'll just sit back here and let you kids do your thing." Like that's what Chewie is. Like that's who Chewie is. And then he's
Yep.
also the guy that when he sees you're about to mess up is like, "No, I'm going to step up and flip all these
Flip the
switches now
switcher.
because like I'm also like the one who's going to protect you in this. Like I'm going to give you space, but I'm also going to
Yep.
be the one that steps in and like saves your butt too."
Yep.
Um and
I love that whole part. Well,
and like
and
you're
if you look at
190 years old, you look
oh,
great.
that part. Well, if you watch our, I did a trailer
So,
reaction,
hey
and
Skynovi.
it has that line in it, and I lost my mind. Like I didn't even see the rest of the trailer because I was laughing so hard. Welcome, Skynobi. I was just losing it, and I love it, and I love that Han and Chewie have this like really equal relationship, even though Chewie is much older than him. It's kind of funny because Lando is always calling Luke, or Lando's always calling Han like kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's always trying to like get under skin, but like Chewie is always like, they're pals, and I love that, and I love that Chewie probably just assumes that Kira can co-pilot,
Yeah.
and then figures out she can't. So he's
Yeah.
like, whatever. If he wants the chick to co-pilot, that's fine. And he's like, she can't co-pilot. I love Kira's line there of like, we definitely do. We definitely need to do that thing you just said.
um and it's not that she's like incapable because like she knows
No.
exactly how to like detach the part from L3 to like plug into the hyperdrive.
Right.
Like she does all of that herself. but yeah, I just love Chewie in that moment, and I still think there's so much about this movie that I love,
Mm-hmm.
but I think my favorite scene in the whole film is still the Han and Chewie in the like in the pit scene. Um, where Han
The great battle
is
of pretend.
yeah, when he's speaking that broken Shriwook, like, oh, it gets me every time. Like, I just remember
It's
rolling in the theaters.
so perfect.
But I feel, but also like in the moment, like Chewie goes and rescues all the other Wookiees, but then he also comes back.
Yeah.
Like he goes and he says, it's like he has this compulsion to go do this thing that he knows is morally right, but then he still
Yep.
goes back. And like
Yep.
everything about that is just so Chewbacca. Like that's
Yep.
exactly who he is. Like he's the
Let's
person who would never say anything about not getting a medal.
right.
Um, but
Well, it's what Bear says. Chewie is number one space dad. That's true.
yep,
I've decided that Chewie is now Rey's dad,
yep,
her adopted dad.
yep,
I think the internet in general feels that way. But no, Chewie was spot on and so well played, and just the way like Han has to translate for him, and I don't know, he works so well. As the Chewie with the goggles was great. I love Chewie with
yeah.
the protective goggles. But we really haven't talked much about Lando or L3 or how wonderful they are together.
So uh, I have an affection for these characters that is a deep seated kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, as much as Han Solo is charming in this film, like Lando just is like the personification of charm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like and the casting for that too, like you said earlier, like Donald Glover is just great. Like it's just so good. Um,
It's like they cloned Billy D. And
yeah. But like everything about like the way that Lando has like made the this light freighter into like a luxury yacht.
yep.
Like I think that says so much about who Lando is too, because it's not like the Falcon is a bad ship, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not a yacht. But he's
Right.
like, I gave it a mini bar and I've got a coat closet, and I've done all of these things. Like look how fancy the walls are, and I've got this nice plating on the outside. Like,
Yep.
and that's so Lando to a person though, to say no, I'm this regular kind of guy, but on the
Yep.
outside I'm gonna be as debonair and as suave as is possible. Like there's no one out there who is going to be more charismatic than Lando is, and like we get
It's
all of that in this film too.
it's so eerie too. The time sometimes he talks and it really is like Billy D is talking. Like it's freakish
Yeah,
how good he does and how he can get the little vocal inflections. It freaks me out, kind of.
and you think like that's the guy off Community who's also like a rapper, and it's like
Yeah.
I'm like Donald Glover is just so like different people in different moments, but is like all of them at the same time too.
Yep. Like I
Um,
said, he's unfair.
yeah,
He is unfair. He's too darn talented.
but I know about a lot of the things like the interactions that Han has with Lando. Like those things are meant to again like prick our nostalgia. Like
Yep.
when they meet at the end and like it
Mm-hmm.
looks like Han is gonna punch him and he ends up giving him a hug. Like that's an Empire reference, but like when like as smooth an operator as he is, like when Han Solo walks up at the end and he's wearing like a Hawaiian shirt,
Yep.
like
I
I
love that shirt.
I don't even know how like the words to describe how much Lando is Lando in this film, and like
It works
I
so
so want more of Donald Glover as Lando.
We
Um,
need like it would be an injustice if we didn't. It really really would.
and maybe this is an appropriate time to point out the fact that I loved Donald Glover as Lando even before we saw the film, to the extent that I made a music video, a parody song about it.
You
Um,
did.
just
It's on the channel.
yep. But oh, I don't know. I love it so much. And then L3, I, I as much as I love all the characters in this film, like my affection for L3, I think is the most. In no small part because her politics resound with mine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but oh, like every scene that she's in, I feel like she makes that scene better, and
Yep.
and I loved Lando's Luck, the book that we got, while we're talking about other books, and we get more Lando and L3, like that is so
Yep.
quintessentially Lando and L3 in that book. But like
Yeah,
she is,
Justina Ireland's that, and then the Lando comic by oh, I know his name too. I can't think of it off my head, but it
yeah,
was
I've
the
still never
Lando
read
Double or
Double or
Nothing
Nothing.
comic.
Yeah, I've still never read
Yeah,
that.
it's pretty good. Oh yeah, it's good though. There's a lot of good Lando L3 moments in it.
But like she is so like sassy, but in like such a confident way, which again is different than like Leia's sass and confidence.
Right.
But oh, I just I love L3 so much, and she has some of the funniest lines in a film that's already funny.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like when she's talking to Kira about whether or not she should like, go out with Lando, and she's like, "Well, we both know there's something there," and Kira's like, "How would that even work?" And she's like, "Oh, it would
It
work."
works.
Yeah. Like I'm like, oh, what is this? Like I don't even like. Oh, I want more
I
of this,
don't.
please. Just give me
I
like
don't even.
feature
Well,
film length of this. Like that's all I
I
want.
love the way they interact because I saw when you were live tweeting, you did the line where it's like, "Can I get you anything?" and she says, "Equal
Equal
rights."
rights, yeah.
And the part of that I always laugh at isn't her equal rights line. It's the massive eye roll that Lando has after it. Like
Yeah.
that's like I just imagine anytime he's like, "Can I get you anything?" It's like it's funny because we see it once in the movie, but she must say that like 4 times a week because he's just like, ah.
Well, see, and I feel like one of the reasons that resonates with me, and I don't even think about it until this moment, is that I recognize that eye roll in like literally every person in my in real life because they're like, "Oh, Terry's talking about his politics stuff again." I guess, yep, we should have known better than to ask him that question. But like the amount of like conviction that's there in that moment, but also like she's throwing complete shade at him in that moment too.
Yeah.
Like it's not just like you could have had like an activist person that like leaned too much into like film and TV tropes about like crazy activist people, but like
Right.
she is that activist, but is also like, no, I know exactly what you're thinking about me, and I'm gonna play into it. um
Right.
like like when she frees the droids on Kessel, like that's
I've made a distraction. I found my purpose.
like and like just screaming revolution, like, oh, I love it so much, like it's just the best thing ever.
Well, and I love the way they play off of it because Lando acts like he's so over it,
Yeah.
and yet you can tell he totally does care. Like he's heartbroken
Yeah.
when she dies,
Right.
and I like it when they're leaving the bar to go get the Falcon,
Hmm.
and he's like, "Yeah, we have to take these guys to Kessel." She's like, "What if I don't elect to go to Kessel?" He's like, "What are you gonna do? Because you're my." I can't remember what the word she uses. It's not owner, but it's something like that. And he's like, "What about as your captain?" He's like, "I'm literally your boss. I'm not telling you because I'm a human. I'm telling you because I pay you."
But I
Like chill
also,
out for a second.
in that same scene, I love the moment where she's like cutting through the wire to get him to the landing dock, and she's like, "I can't do this
Mechanic
if you're
overload.
watching
Thank
me."
you.
Um, but oh, I don't know. I love L3 so much, and I love that like she becomes like a perpetual part of everything that we didn't know we needed and didn't know that we had, because like she becomes the Falcon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's throwback to the 3PO line, like, I don't know where your ship like learned to communicate,
This
um
very peculiar dialect.
but oh, it's just so like I wonder, like every time R2 and 3PO interface with the Falcon, and she's like, you should like dump these fools, right? like 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 what are you doing here, R2? Like you were the smartest person on this ship, like why are you here? Go do something else. um
Oh my gosh. No, it's a great dynamic. It's just the way all the characters play off of each other. And what's funny is it's not even that long of a film. I think it's pretty darn close to 2 hours.
yeah.
And and yes, thank you, Stuart. And uh but it also feels like all of these different films because like I can think of like Han and Lando and L3 interacting, and then I can think of Han and Chewie with Beckett's crew, and I can think of all of the Crimson Dawn stuff, and it feels like all of these should be different movies, but they're somehow all in this one movie,
Right.
and it's really expertly done. My favorite thing in the movie is the giant space octopus.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how it's possible. I don't know what it eats normally. I don't know how it got there. But like I live for weird stuff.
Yeah.
And I like that space octopus. Like I was obsessed with it from the time we got the first trailer with it on. I was like, what is this?
Well, and like I love too that everything about like the Kessel Run and the Maelstrom
Mm-hmm.
and the Maw, like all of that is like straight Legends material too, and like they
Yep.
were able to work that in a way that gives us such a great moment like that. Um, I don't know. I really love that too.
Well, and I even like the idea that he made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. It's
Yeah.
like that ends up becoming like a big fish story.
Yeah.
That it was really more than 12 parsecs, but it's 12 if you round down. But then
Right.
somehow it became less than 12
Yep.
parsecs.
Oh, it's
What they still did it fast is the thing. Like they still got through it with significantly less parsecs than
right.
you would normally need.
I mean, because Lando
Um,
says right before that it's impossible to do in fewer than 20.
right,
And so, like, 13 in that moment is still, you know,
really good.
faster than anyone else has ever done it.
But I like that. And then in terms of weird stuff, I love Lady Proxima. Like,
Oh, I do
just
too.
they work for this weird worm lady that works in a or lives in a pool, and she can't go out in the sun. And like all of the weird worm guys with their weird half worm, half dog things.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know. Like all of that stuff on Corellia is so cool.
I mean, and that scene, as early as it is in the film, was when I was certain that I was going to love that film.
Mm-hmm.
When Han's like, it's got this fake,
It's
this
a thermal
rock.
detonator.
Yeah,
Like that's a rock. You made a clicking sound with your mouth.
like that was when I was completely sold on this film.
Yep.
I'm like, no,
Like
this
this
is
is Han Solo.
exactly what I want out of this. Like, thank you. Like, this is what I needed. Um,
That is Han Solo. That is, and then you wonder like, was that his plan? And then it didn't work. So then he came up with the plan of throwing the rock into the building, or was his plan always to throw the rock into the building and he was buying time? Will we ever know? Does Han himself even know?
Hmm.
Who knows? But like, there's so many little fun moments like that. Like when he goes to where the hyperfuel is, and he's stuck, and he doesn't have any help, and he sees the guy, and the guy's talking in a language he doesn't understand, and he's
oh
just
yeah,
like repeating the language back.
right.
Like I don't know. I liked all of that. Stuart, I've seen people say that it's what inspired Leia to use it. Like maybe if Han told Leia the story, but really I think it's just a fun connection,
Yeah.
like it's poetry, it rhymes thing. I think a closer thing is Beckett wearing the same disguise that Lando wears in Return of the Jedi.
Yep, I was just about to say the same thing there.
But
Because
yeah.
you can almost see that as just having stayed on the Falcon the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. And while we're just talking about things that we liked, I think one of the funniest moments for me too is at the end when they're showing down against Enfys Nests, which we haven't really talked about Enfys Nest either. But
Yeah.
when they're in like the little standoff at Enfys Nest, and Han is like, "You see that ship? I've got 30 commandos down there," and then Lando just leaves. Oh, I'm like, that's such a Han moment, but that's also such a Lando moment for Han
Yeah.
to like overstate and like try to sound cooler than he is, and Lando also be like, "No, I'm leaving now." um, oh, I laughed so hard again watching it when I
It's
saw
so
that.
good. But you know, Infant's Nest is really cool. Um, and I like that little play of like, who's this character gonna be through the whole
Mm,
movie. It ended up not necessarily be it wasn't necessarily like a twist, but it was more of a twist that it was this very young person. You know,
right,
you're expecting this very hardened, nasty bounty hunter type, and then it ends up being somebody who's starting into the rebellion,
right.
which was interesting. For a brief moment when they meet her, I wondered if they weren't going to make her related to Beth, but they, which would have been interesting. But I think it's better that it wasn't that way. I think it's better that she's her own character.
Yeah, I think so too. But I think you're right that the reveal is that, and I looked this up too because I was curious. She's supposed to be, I think, 16
Hmm.
in this, and so like you're supposed to get that she's, young, but she's not, like that much younger than Luke and Leia in A New Hope, even,
Hmm.
or they're older, in fact, maybe than Padme um in Phantom Menace,
Yeah.
um but yeah, no, I thought it was such a good character too, um and I think she makes such an impassioned speech, and like the way that it affects Han, I think is important. So and I like the character design too. I think it's a cool looking
Yeah.
outfit.
And I kind of like the journey of, at first you think she's a marauder, and then you realize she's a young kid, and then you realize, like, oh, she's doing all of this to help all of these people who are disenfranchised. So then you think, okay, maybe she's like a Robin Hood type. And then at the very, very end of the movie, you find out that she's in the beginning stages of the formal rebellion against the Empire,
Right.
and actually invites Han to be a part of it then, which he doesn't take her up on.
Do we know for sure whether or not there's connections between Enfys Nest and Saw Gerrera? Because I feel like we do. I don't know how we do that.
I feel like we do too, but I feel like it's from a like a guidebook or something. I don't think
Yeah,
it's from
maybe so.
anything.
Because her
Um,
Cloud Riders are not that different than like the
there
partisans
was
the way we've seen them.
one of the books we've read. I can't remember which one it is now. Listed off like a bunch of partisans, and it had like Saw Gerrera and Enfys Nest, but I can't remember what it was now that we would have read.
Right.
Um, but Two Tubes, yes, Two Tubes is a member of her and goes to Saw. That is.
Right.
Um, but no, I like that too, and it's gonna be interesting because obviously I've watched Rogue One since Solo has come out, but I have never watched Solo and then watched Rogue One.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting to watch these anthology films, how they fit into the saga films, because I know there's a couple other like YouTube channels or podcast channels that are doing similar things where they're rewatching everything, but some of them are just doing saga films.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to leave the anthology film, and I think it's interesting to go from something like Revenge of the Sith to Solo, but I think Solo can feed into Rogue One really well, even though it's a completely different set of characters.
Right.
It's showing that change. Okay, now you're kind of in this lawless galaxy apart from the overbearing Empire, and then Rogue One is how we go from that to rebellion forming, especially if you are only watching the films and you're not watching Rebels or something like that. It can show you that progression.
Right. Um, Other things I want to just really briefly mention. I think I wanted to say again how much I liked the music for this. I wanted to say
Mm-hmm.
how much I liked that we get something scroll like in this at the
Yeah.
beginning. It's not the crawl that we're familiar with, but it's still something that kind of gives us a prologue into what we're seeing. I like. Have you read the Han Solo Imperial Cadet comic?
I
Um,
have not.
I know that
That was
I
you.
did the
I
review
read
for
Double
that.
or Nothing, and you read Imperial Cadet.
Oh, yep, there we go. That was the thing. But I like that we get like Han on the battlefield. Like that's
Yeah.
such a weird moment when you think about it, but I like that. I love all the things that are just kind of hanging out in Dryden Voss's office. The way that we get like all the different Easter eggs that are just chilling out back there. I
Mm-hmm.
love the Black Spire and the Doc Ondar references. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I remember catching the Black Spire one even in theaters because I knew Black Spire was going to be the place at Galaxy's Edge. But it was, and welcome to Neil and Dave, two of my favorite people.
yeah,
Uh, but I hadn't caught the Doc Ondar reference, and I was watching through it today, and I heard Kira say the name, and I was like, that sounds like Doc Ondar. And so I threw on captions real quick, and I freaked because Doc being the runner of the antiquity shop at Black Spire's outpost in Galaxy's Edge. So that was really fun.
but I feel like there are just so many like small details that really make this film what it is, and it's like hard to like list them all.
Mm-hmm.
But so many things about this just make it a way better film than it gets credit for, honestly.
Yeah.
And I think it's a shame that people don't give it that type of attention.
Well, I feel like now I I, I know of some people who didn't like Solo, and if you didn't, that's but for by and large, I know more people who never saw Solo than people who didn't. And I
Yeah,
feel
that's
like
fair enough.
part of that was it didn't get marketed when it was released. It was released like 3 weeks after Infinity War and like a couple weeks after Deadpool 2, and it just got lost because it wasn't marketed. And then because it didn't do as well in the box office, people assumed it was bad and then didn't. And I've been trying to convince people ever since that like no, it's really good. Somehow people just didn't see it, and I think that's really the biggest shame is because it's really just this is what I feel like people wanted Star Wars movies to be, but they were too busy complaining about Star Wars movies to go see the movie that was finally the movie they wanted.
Yeah,
But that's just my own soapbox.
yeah. But, anything else you can think of you want to talk about? I know we're not really on like a time crunch today, but
See, Stuart says honestly like Solo, but agree that you didn't need it and you don't want it. Really? Okay. I am hoping for
see, I want
at least
9 sequels to
something.
this film.
Yeah, I mean, I want more with everybody, but I think that it would do better on Disney Plus. I feel like on Disney Plus you could have a Lando series or a Kira series, and you wouldn't need to connect everything in the way that like a true Solo sequel would need. Because if you were only getting it as a movie, you would need to find another story where all of these characters could connect again, and I don't know if there's a good story for that.
Yeah,
But there's definitely good Lando stories we could get with Donald Glover, definitely good Kira stories we could get with Amelia Clark. And in a context like Disney Plus, you could get those. And then Wee Hours, my friend Dave says, never understood why people didn't like Solo. Perfectly good action movie. Yeah, it's fun. Like it's not the most intellectually stimulating movie, but it wasn't trying to be. It didn't change my life, but it wasn't trying to. It was fun. It's like you sit down for 2 hours and you have a good time and you feel good. Dang
right.
it. And that's all I really
I
want.
mean, but at the same time, I feel like Ron Howard's relationship with George Lucas, though, like, is
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons why this feels so much like Star Wars too.
Yes.
And I feel like that's a personal connection there that like speaks to one because Ron Howard's a good director. Like I remember, as soon as Ron Howard was the one that they were announcing was going to replace 21 Jump Street. Um,
Lord and Miller.
yeah, Lloyd Miller, Lego Movie. But um, like as soon as they said Ron Howard, like the only name that I would have been more excited about for directing Solo would have been Steven Spielberg, and at this point, I just don't think we're ever going to get Spielberg doing Star Wars.
Right.
If it was going to happen, it would have happened by now.
The closest thing we have is J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, but like I don't know. I love everything about Solo, and it doesn't have to be like one of the reasons I like it is that it proves, at least to me personally, that not everything has to be deep force philosophy for it to be darn good Star Wars.
Yep.
And not everything has to be something that radically changes the way we think about the universe in
Yep.
order for it to be darn good Star Wars, because that's what this movie is darn good Star Wars.
And that's what happened in Legends, and that's where people started to get so frustrated with Legends. Is everything in Legends was either a new big event or it was well, we need to find a way to make you fundamentally never watch the movies the same way again, so let's change a thing for no reason.
Right.
And that's what late Legends really felt like. And I love Legends. We like to reread Legends. We just read a Legends book and they're great. But like that became the issue where you felt like you couldn't tell a story unless it blew your mind. Uh, and Solo was about it didn't have to blow my mind. It just was a good movie.
Yeah. Anything you want to say really quickly about Darth Maul? Since we just had
Oh,
a whole conversation about Darth Maul yesterday. um,
oh I just dropped the glasses. I was so freaking happy. Like, I get why it's frustrating for some people, but like when I saw Darth Maul in it, like I was in a like my theater has recliners, and I was in a recliner, and I think I somehow levitated out of my chair, and like ended up on the floor because I was so excited that Darth Maul was in it. And yes, Neil, I completely agree. Oh my gosh, but like it just felt so validating because I feel like I've been telling people for years to watch the animated shows,
Yeah.
to watch Clone Wars and to watch Rebels, and people are like, nah. And then to have Maul alive in the movie just felt so good. And I like the movie should be able to stand on their own. You shouldn't have to watch 7 seasons of the Clone Wars and once you get the new season and like 4 seasons of Rebels to get a movie. I understand that. But if we had gotten a Solo sequel, they could have explained where Maul came from in the
Right.
movies. But what I know is after Solo, I went and hung out with a friend who was like, "What's up with Darth Maul?" And we sat down and I showed her like every Darth Maul episode from the Clone Wars. And that was something she probably wouldn't have done if Maul wasn't in Solo.
Right.
And that's just the you can be cynical about it and you can be like, well, that's just Disney trying to make everything they have a commercial for other things they have. Or you can see it as this wonderful network of connecting storylines. And if we're being honest, it can be both. Like Disney can both make like books to promote you going to visit Galaxy's Edge while also just writing a good story about Galaxy's Edge. Like
Right.
both of these things can be true at the same time.
Yeah. Like
And it was a good moment to me.
I just remember being in the theater and like just being blown away by how excited I was for that. One, because I've come to like Darth Maul a lot more than I used to.
Yeah.
Not that I never like disliked Darth Maul,
Right.
um, but I was so excited for the animated connection, and I was just like just blown away by how awesome it was. That was my first thought, and then like immediately after, I'm like, I'm gonna have to explain this to people, and but like this can be something that I can use to justify why you should have cared about this stuff all along, because I was one of those people that didn't care all along.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I came to the Clone Wars late, after it had finished,
Yep.
um, and I feel like I wish that I had gotten into it earlier, and I feel like this is a
Mm.
good way to like show, no, we're not going to say this is necessarily required in order for you to get Solo, but it's the only thing in a film to ever reference apart from like the Easter egg in Rogue One where they talk about General
Right.
Syndulla, and or the ghost showing up in Rise of Skywalker, however that will work out. But like
Right.
to have a film like not just give an offhand Easter egg, but like a definite reference to something that happened in in the animated series, like I can't say enough about how important and validating that was for people who like those animated shows.
Yeah.
Um, but and
Yeah.
I
No, it
also like the
was.
idea that we could get a little bit more of this content in the little bit of the Clone Wars that's still left to come too.
Yeah. I mean, anything there would be set before this movie, but
Right.
it could move to set that up,
Yeah.
and I think that's exciting. And I really do think that be it a Crimson Dawn show like Stuart's talking about, or just something else, I think that will be really plausible, especially if Mandalorian does well. If Mandalorian does well, then another kind of underworld show like a Crimson Dawn show, I think, will be
Right.
more probable.
I mean, and I think Disney Plus will be a platform where we can get some 4, 6 episode miniseries, to fill in
Mm-hmm.
some stuff, even if it's animated stuff, to have
Yeah.
like a half season, 12 episodes of a half hour animated show, to fill
Yeah.
in some stuff, and I'm fine with that. I'm totally down with the possibility of that, because I still think there's Kira stories that I want to know about. There's still Maul stories I want to know about. There's other pieces to this puzzle, that I want to know about. And as much
Mm-hmm.
as I'm 100% on board with our pals on Twitter's make Solo 2 happen.
Yeah.
Um, hashtag like movement going on there, I would be fine with whatever form this takes. I think it's too good for this to be the only
Yeah.
time we get any of this.
Well, and I think if you guys follow, it's the Resistance broadcast podcast, which are really great people. They call it "Make Solo 2 Happen" just because it's snappier that way. But
Right.
their campaign, they would also feel satisfied if it was a Disney Plus show. It's more like continue the story
Right.
that deserves to be continued.
Yeah. Anything else you can think of?
No, I think we're good. Like I said, I'm really excited to go from this to watching Rogue One, which we'll discuss next week, and we'll probably discuss next week Friday. Our schedule's going to get wacky because we've been doing these streams on Friday, but starting the week after next, there's going to be Mandalorian episodes on Fridays. So we're going to figure out how we're going to juggle Resistance reviews, Mandalorian reviews, our normal stream cast, and our Rise of Skywalker streams.
Yep.
So some things might change and some things might change. Oh, and I'm still doing Bloodline. So like that's 5 things that we do every week right now.
Yep. And we've not yet decided how we're gonna reorganize that. So what better way to plug all of our social media things as ways that you can figure out what we're gonna do when, or to let us know, like if these, like if you've really been into having this on a Friday afternoon and like that's something you would super duper be down for, then tell us that too, and maybe that's something we can think about as we set things up.
I can always do Mandalorian reviews on Saturday instead of on Friday. It's just probably better for the algorithm on Friday.
Yeah,
so.
I think so too. But for next Friday, come ready to hear an hour-long discussion about how Grand Moff Tarkin is a better character than Orson Krennic, and that's going to do it for us today.
It's so incorrect. Wildly incorrect.
But
next week's going to be really rough because it's just going to be Django and I arguing about Tarkin and Krennic the entire time. We won't even talk about the movie.
I'll bring Catalyst with me. I'll grab Catalyst and Tarkin off the shelf, and we'll just have them here for reference points.
I have my little Orson over here. My Mendel Bros.
I mean, one of those characters got force choked like a little punk, and the other told Vader what to do. So, well.
The thing is, he liked it.
But yeah, so lots to talk about with Rogue One next week. It's gonna be fun, and we hope. I mean, maybe it just turns out that they're all secretly Skrulls in the end, and have been, for the last 5 movies or whatever.
No one in Rogue One died. They were all Skrulls.
Yeah, they're hanging out on a a holographic beach somewhere. But yeah, yes. Battle of the Capes next week, Friday. We hope you guys have a good weekend, and we will see you later.
Thank you so much for being here, guys.
Bye.
Bye.